My name is Sarah, I'm 32, and I thought I knew my family until my brother Marcus decided to use my $800,000 inherited family home for his wedding without asking. What started as a small ceremony turned into a full-scale takeover attempt that would expose 20 years of lies, manipulation, and a conspiracy that went deeper than I ever imagined. The day I found him at my front door with a moving truck claiming he had every right to live there was the day I discovered the truth about my parents' will, my brother's gambling debts, and why my sister-in-law had been so friendly lately. But before we dive into this family betrayal that'll make your jaw drop, let me ask, where are you watching from? Have you ever had family turn against you when money was involved? Hit that like button if you're ready for some serious family karma. And don't forget to subscribe, because this story has more twists than a soap opera. Trust me, you'll want to see how this revenge unfolds. 2 months before the moving truck incident, everything seemed normal. I was living peacefully in our childhood home in suburban Denver, which I'd inherited after both parents passed in a car accident 3 years earlier. The house had been in our family for generations, a beautiful Victorian with wraparound porches and enough land for the garden Mom always loved. Marcus had been struggling financially since his divorce, and his new fiancée Jessica seemed sweet enough when they visited for holidays. I genuinely liked her actually. She was studying to become a nurse, worked part-time at a local clinic, and seemed to ground Marcus in a way his ex-wife never had. When they got engaged last spring, I was happy for them. The first red flag should have been the sudden interest in our family history. Jessica started asking detailed questions about the house during their visits. When was it built? What renovations had been done? How much property came with it? She'd wander around taking photos, claiming she was documenting family memories for a scrapbook she was making for Marcus. I thought it was thoughtful. Marcus began bringing up childhood memories more frequently too. He'd reminisce about our treehouse, the tire swing Dad hung from the old oak, how we used to play hide and seek in the basement. It felt like bonding, like we were reconnecting as adults after years of living separate lives. I was lonely in that big house, so I welcomed these visits. Then came the wedding planning conversations. They were having budget issues, Jessica's student loans, Marcus's child support payments, the general expense of starting over in your 40s. When Marcus casually mentioned how beautiful our backyard would be for an outdoor ceremony, I offered to host their wedding. Why wouldn't I? Family helps family, right? Just something small, Marcus assured me. Maybe 30 people, a simple barbecue reception. Jessica's been dreaming of a garden wedding, and honestly, Sarah, it would mean the world to us. Money's tight, and you know how Mom would have loved seeing her son married here. Playing the mom card was dirty but effective. Mom had always envisioned family celebrations in that garden. She'd planted rose bushes, specifically imagining future grandchildren playing among them. The guilt worked perfectly. I spent weeks preparing. I hired professionals to restore the gazebo, had the lawn professionally landscaped, even paid for new outdoor lighting. The house hadn't looked this beautiful since Mom's time. I was genuinely excited to see Marcus happy again after his bitter divorce. Jessica was heavily involved in the planning, which I appreciated. She had good taste and seemed to understand the house's character. When she suggested moving some of Mom's antiques to safer storage during the event, it made sense. When she recommended specific caterers who understood historic homes, I trusted her judgment. The wedding was lovely. Exactly 30 guests, just as promised. Jessica looked radiant in her vintage lace dress, and Marcus seemed genuinely happy. The ceremony was held under the gazebo, where my parents had renewed their vows for their 25th anniversary. I may have cried a little, thinking about how proud Mom would have been. But during the reception, I noticed things that seemed odd in retrospect. Several guests I didn't recognize as Marcus's friends or Jessica's family. They weren't just wedding crashers, they moved through the house like they belonged there, commenting on architectural details, and asking specific questions about room layouts. When I asked Marcus about them, he said they were Jessica's nursing school friends. Jessica's maid of honor, a sharp-eyed woman named Patricia, spent considerable time photographing not just the celebration but the interior of the house, every room, every angle, even the basement and attic. For the wedding album, she explained when I questioned it, The strangest moment came during the reception when I overheard Patricia talking to another guest near the kitchen window. The layout is exactly like Jessica described, she was saying. The master bedroom has that private entrance and the basement office would be perfect for. She stopped talking when she noticed me approaching. After the celebration ended and cleanup was finished, Marcus and Jessica seemed reluctant to leave. They lingered on the front porch taking more photos, Jessica's hand resting possessively on the porch railing. When they finally drove away that night, Jessica turned to wave goodbye, but her expression wasn't nostalgic. It was calculating. I should have trusted my instincts then. Instead, I ignored the red flags and focused on how happy I was that Marcus had found love again. That naive trust would cost me dearly in the weeks to come. 3 weeks after the wedding, I was working in my home office when I heard vehicles in the driveway. Through my window, I saw Marcus and Jessica climbing out of a U-Haul truck followed by 2 men I didn't recognize. My first thought was that they were returning something borrowed for the wedding. Then Marcus started directing the men toward my front door, and my stomach dropped. I met them on the porch, still wearing my pajamas since it was barely 8 in the morning. "Marcus, what's going on?" He couldn't meet my eyes. Jessica stood behind him, arms crossed, looking like she owned the place. "We need to talk, Sarah," he said. "Can we come in?" Inside, Marcus sat heavily on Mom's antique sofa, while Jessica remained standing surveying the room like a real estate appraiser. The 2 men waited on the porch, clearly hired muscle not moving company employees. The thing is, Marcus began fidgeting with his wedding ring. "We've been doing some research and it turns out this house situation isn't as straightforward as we thought." My blood went cold. "What do you mean?" Jessica stepped forward, pulling out a folder thick with documents. "Marcus never received his fair share of the inheritance, Sarah. Your parents' will was incomplete." "That's impossible. The lawyer handled everything properly. You both got your portions. Marcus got Dad's life insurance, I got the house." Actually, Jessica continued, her voice taking on a legal precision that seemed rehearsed. "We consulted with an estate attorney and there are questions about the will's validity. The house was supposed to be divided equally between all children." Marcus finally looked at me, but his expression was guilty, not apologetic. "Sarah, I never wanted it to come to this, but Jessica's right. I've been struggling financially and it's not fair that you got the most valuable asset just because you were Dad's favorite." The accusation hit like a physical blow. "Dad's favorite, Marcus? I got the house because I was the one taking care of them. I gave up my apartment in Chicago. I quit my job at the consulting firm. I spent 2 years caring for them. While you visited twice a month, that was your choice," Jessica interjected. "It doesn't entitle you to the entire estate." I felt dizzy. "Marcus, tell me you don't believe this. You know why they left me the house. We discussed this at the reading of the will. You said you understood." He shifted uncomfortably. "Things were different then. I wasn't thinking clearly about the future, about starting a new family. Jessica's pregnant, Sarah. We need a stable home for our baby." The pregnancy announcement should have been joyful news shared with love and excitement. Instead, it felt like another manipulation tactic. "Congratulations," I managed, though the word tasted bitter. "But that doesn't change the legal facts. The will was valid, the house is mine." Jessica smiled coldly. "Actually, we've already filed a lawsuit challenging the will. Our attorney says we have a strong case, especially given the circumstances around how your parents died." The implication was sickening. Circumstances. They died in a car accident. "An accident that happened while you were their primary caregiver," Jessica continued. "An accident that left you as the sole beneficiary of their most valuable asset. Our lawyer thinks a jury might find that suspicious." I stared at Marcus, waiting for him to defend me, to tell his wife she'd gone too far. Instead, he looked away. "We're not saying you did anything wrong, Sarah, but the timing does raise questions. My own brother was essentially accusing me of murdering our parents for inheritance money." The betrayal was so complete, so devastating that I couldn't speak for several moments. When I found my voice, it came out as a whisper. "Get out of my house." "Actually," Jessica said, consulting her papers, "we filed for emergency occupancy rights. Given the questionable nature of your ownership and our current housing situation, the court has granted us temporary residence rights pending the lawsuit's resolution." She handed me an official-looking document. My hands shook as I read it. Legal jargon about disputed property and emergency housing provisions and pending litigation. It looked legitimate, but something felt wrong. "You planned this," I said, understanding flooding through me. "The wedding, the house tour, Jessica's photography. You were gathering evidence, planning this takeover." Marcus had the decency to look ashamed. "It wasn't supposed to happen like this. We just needed options, and when Jessica found that lawyer who said we might have a case, we need you to move into the guest bedroom," Jessica announced. "We'll be taking the master suite. The baby will need the room that's currently your office." They were moving into my parents' bedroom, displacing me like I was the unwelcome guest. The audacity was breathtaking. "I'm calling my attorney." "That's your right," Jessica said calmly. "But until this is resolved, we'll be living here." The moving truck is already being unloaded. Through the window, I could see those two men carrying boxes and furniture into my house. My sanctuary, my inheritance, the home where I'd cared for dying parents and grieved their loss. It was being invaded by the very people who should have protected me. That night I lay in what used to be my childhood bedroom, listening to Marcus and Jessica moving around in my parents' room. I could hear them talking occasionally, laughing, planning their new life in my home. The betrayal felt like drowning in slow motion. But as I stared at the ceiling, something besides grief began growing inside me. They'd made one crucial mistake in their perfect plan. They'd underestimated exactly how far I was willing to go to protect what was rightfully mine. The next morning I called my parents' estate attorney, David Mitchell, whose number I still had saved in my phone. David had been Dad's friend for over 20 years and had handled all our family's legal matters. When I explained the situation, his response was immediate and reassuring. "Sarah, that document Jessica showed you is complete nonsense. I drafted your parents' will myself, and it's ironclad. There's no ambiguity about the house. It goes to you, period. What you're describing sounds like an elaborate con game." Relief flooded through me, followed quickly by rage. "So they can't actually take my house, not through any legitimate legal channel. The will was properly witnessed, filed correctly, and your inheritance has been legally settled for 3 years. No court would grant emergency occupancy rights based on a frivolous challenge to a valid will. Then how do they have an official-looking document?" David was quiet for a moment. "Sarah, I need you to bring me that paperwork immediately, and I think we need to involve the police. What you're describing sounds like fraud, potentially multiple felonies." Now this is where things get really interesting, and if you've ever dealt with family members who think they can manipulate legal documents, you know how satisfying this next part is going to be. Make sure you're subscribed because this story is about to take a turn that'll restore your faith in justice, and you won't want to miss how karma comes for people who think they're smarter than the system. I drove to David's office with the fake document, my hands still shaking with adrenaline and fury. David examined it under a magnifying glass, then made several phone calls while I waited. After 45 minutes, he hung up with a grim smile. "Sarah, this document is a forgery, and not even a good one. The case number is fake, the judge's signature is traced from public records, and the law firm listed doesn't exist. Whoever created this committed multiple felonies." "It has to be Jessica," I said. "She was asking too many legal questions, and she seemed to know exactly what buttons to push with Marcus. Let's find out." David called a private investigator he'd worked with before, a former police detective named Maria Santos. Within 2 hours, Maria was in David's office with preliminary findings that made my jaw drop. "Jessica Chen isn't a nursing student," Maria announced, sliding a folder across David's desk. "She's a paralegal who was fired from her last job for falsifying documents. Before that, she worked for a personal injury firm that was shut down for insurance fraud." My stomach lurched. "So she knows how to create fake legal papers." "Gets better," Maria continued. "She's been married before, twice. Both marriages ended with mysterious property disputes, where she tried to claim ownership of assets that belonged to her husband's families. She's been running the same con for years." David leaned forward. "What about Marcus? Is he involved willingly?" Maria consulted her notes. "That's where it gets complicated. Marcus Chen, yes, he took her last name, which is unusual, has been having an affair with Jessica for over 2 years, including while he was still married to his first wife. But more importantly, he owes over $200,000 to some very dangerous people. The room went silent as this sank in. Gambling debts, I asked. Sports betting primarily. Started small, escalated quickly. The creditors have been pressuring him for months. From what I can determine through financial records, Jessica approached him with this scheme as a solution to his problems. She targeted him, David said grimly. Found a man desperate enough to betray his own family. But Maria wasn't finished. There's more. The pregnancy Jessica mentioned. According to medical records I was able to access through a contact, she's not pregnant, never has been. It's another manipulation tactic. I felt sick. Every single thing Jessica had said was a lie designed to manipulate and deceive. But knowing the truth wasn't enough. I needed them out of my house and facing consequences for what they'd done. David outlined our strategy. First, we'd file a police report for forgery, fraud, and illegal trespass. Second, we'd get an emergency restraining order forcing them out of the house. Third, we'd pursue both civil and criminal charges to the fullest extent of the law. But David warned we need to be smart about this. If Marcus really owes money to dangerous people, we don't want to back him into a corner where he becomes unpredictable. Maria had a different suggestion. Let's use their own tactics against them. They think they're so clever with their fake documents and manipulation. We'll give them enough rope to hang themselves, she explained her plan. We'd set up a meeting with Jessica and Marcus, pretending I was willing to negotiate a settlement. During this meeting we'd record Jessica explaining her legal claims, hopefully getting her to incriminate herself further. Meanwhile, Maria would have police standing by to arrest them for the forgery. The beautiful thing about con artists, Maria said with satisfaction, is that they always think they're the smartest person in the room. Jessica won't be able to resist explaining how clever she's been. That evening I returned to my house to find Jessica cooking dinner in my mother's kitchen using Mom's china as if she owned it. Marcus was in the living room looking deeply uncomfortable but saying nothing. The sight of Jessica wearing Mom's apron while stirring something in Mom's favorite pot filled me with a cold rage. We need to talk, I announced. All of us. I've spoken with attorneys today, and I think we can work something out. Jessica's eyes lit up with greedy satisfaction. I knew you'd see reason eventually. You're not stupid, Sarah. Fighting this in court would cost you more than just accepting that Marcus deserves his share. Marcus looked relieved, probably thinking his sister was finally going to bail him out of the mess he'd created. Neither of them suspected that by tomorrow morning they'd both be in jail and I'd have enough evidence to destroy them completely. The trap was set. Now I just had to be patient enough to let them walk into it. The next morning, I arranged to meet with Marcus and Jessica in the living room, ostensibly to discuss a settlement. What they didn't know was that Maria Santos was positioned outside with recording equipment, and David Mitchell was on standby with police officers just around the corner. Jessica had dressed for the occasion in one of my mother's vintage blazers, which she'd apparently found in the master bedroom closet. The sight of her wearing Mom's clothes while trying to steal Mom's house was almost too much to bear, but I forced myself to stay calm. I've been thinking about what you said. I began settling into Dad's old armchair. About Marcus deserving his fair share. Maybe we can work out some kind of arrangement. Jessica leaned forward eagerly, her eyes gleaming with anticipated victory. I'm so glad you're being reasonable, Sarah. Families should stick together, especially with a baby on the way. Marcus shifted uncomfortably. Sarah, I want you to know I never meant for this to get so complicated. When Jessica first brought up the idea that maybe the will wasn't fair. How exactly did you first bring this up, Jessica? I interrupted, keeping my voice curious rather than accusatory. I mean, what made you think to research our family's inheritance? Jessica practically preened at the opportunity to explain her cleverness.
Well, it's really just common sense.
When Marcus told me about the house, about how valuable it is, it seemed obvious that your parents couldn't have intended for one child to inherit everything while the other got almost nothing. But they didn't leave Marcus with nothing, I pointed out. He got Dad's life insurance policy. $50,000 versus an $800,000 house. Jessica laughed dismissively. That's not equality, Sarah. And honestly, when I looked into the circumstances around your parents' deaths, and how you were their primary caregiver with access to their finances and medical care. She was walking directly into the trap, and I couldn't believe how easily she was incriminating herself. What exactly are you implying, Jessica? I'm not implying anything. I'm stating facts. You had motive, means, and opportunity. A car accident is very convenient when you're the sole heir to someone's estate. Marcus looked horrified. Jessica, we agreed you wouldn't say it like that. Say what like what, Marcus? We're all adults here. Sarah knows what she did and she knows we know. The question is whether she wants to settle this quietly or have it all come out in court. I felt a chill at how casually she was accusing me of murder. This woman was truly dangerous, and I was grateful we'd involved the police. And what kind of settlement did you have in mind? Jessica consulted a notebook she'd brought with her. We'll take ownership of the house and you can have $100,000 cash. That's more than generous, considering the alternative might be a criminal investigation into your parents' deaths. Where would I get $100,000 cash? That's your problem to solve. Maybe take out a loan against your future inheritance from the life insurance Marcus will sign over to you as part of the settlement. The audacity was breathtaking. She wanted me to pay them to steal my house using money I'd have to borrow against assets that were already rightfully mine, but I needed her to be completely explicit about the fraud. What if I refuse? What exactly happens then? Jessica's mask slipped completely. Then we proceed with the lawsuit. Our attorney has already prepared criminal charges alleging that you manipulated your parents into changing their will while they were medically compromised, and that you may have hastened their deaths to secure your inheritance. Your attorney being who exactly? Robert Chen from Chen and Associates, Jessica said confidently. He specializes in estate fraud cases. I nodded thoughtfully as if considering her threats. And the court document you showed me yesterday, the one granting you emergency occupancy rights, completely legitimate. Judge Morrison signed it personally after reviewing our evidence. Maria had been right? Jessica couldn't resist explaining how clever she thought she was. Every word she spoke was digging her grave deeper. I glanced at my phone, seeing David's text confirming that everything was being recorded clearly. Marcus, I said, turning to my brother, is this really what you want, to accuse me of murdering our parents? Marcus looked sick. Sarah, I don't. I mean, Jessica says the evidence is pretty clear, and with the baby coming we just need security. You can find another place to live. This house is too big for one person anyway. What if I told you that Jessica isn't pregnant? Jessica's face went white. That's ridiculous. Of course I'm pregnant. What if I told you that Jessica has been married twice before, and both marriages ended with her trying to steal property from her husband's families? You're lying, Marcus said, but his voice wavered with uncertainty. What if I told you that Robert Chen and Associates don't exist, and that the court document Jessica showed me is a complete forgery? Jessica stood up abruptly. This conversation is over. You're clearly not acting in good faith. Actually, I said, standing as well, this conversation is just getting started. The front door opened and David Mitchell walked in with 2 police officers and Maria Santos. Jessica's face went from white to green as she realized what was happening. Jessica Chen, Officer Rodriguez announced, you're under arrest for forgery, fraud, and criminal impersonation. You have the right to remain silent. The sight of Jessica wearing Mom's apron while stirring something in Mom's favorite pot filled me with a cold rage. We need to talk, I announced. All of us. I've spoken with attorneys today, and I think we can work something out. Jessica's eyes lit up with greedy satisfaction. I knew you'd see reason eventually. You're not stupid, Sarah. Fighting this in court would cost you more than just accepting that Marcus deserves his share. As they led Jessica toward the door, she turned back to me with pure hatred in her eyes. You think you've won, but you have no idea what you've started. Marcus owes people money, serious people. When they find out this plan failed, they'll come looking for payment, and guess who they'll blame? Even in handcuffs, she was still trying to manipulate and threaten. But her words sent a chill through me as I realized this nightmare might not be over yet. After they left, I sat alone in my living room, surrounded by the belongings Jessica and Marcus had moved in. The house felt violated, contaminated by their presence and their lies. But it was mine again, and I was going to make sure it stayed that way. 3 days after Jessica's arrest, David called with news that changed everything I thought I knew about the situation. "Sarah, you need to come to my office immediately. We've discovered something that makes this case much bigger than we initially thought." When I arrived, Maria Santos was already there, surrounded by boxes of documents and looking like she hadn't slept in days. "Sarah, sit down," she said grimly. "What we uncovered is going to shock you." David opened a thick file. After Jessica's arrest, we subpoenaed her financial records and communications. What we found is evidence of a sophisticated long-term con operation targeting inheritance disputes across multiple states. "She's done this before," I said. "You already told me about her previous marriages." "Not just her," Maria interrupted. "This is bigger. Jessica Chen is part of an organized fraud ring that specializes in inheritance theft. They identify families with valuable property, research the family dynamics, then infiltrate through romantic relationships or fake legal claims." She spread out photographs and documents across David's conference table. "Look at this. Over the past 5 years, Jessica and her associates have targeted at least 12 families. The pattern is always the same. Identify a vulnerable family member, create a romantic relationship or fake legal claim, then use forged documents to steal property." David pointed to a particularly damning document. "But here's the real shock, Sarah. Marcus isn't just a victim who got manipulated into helping Jessica. He's been working with this fraud ring for over 2 years. I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach." "What do you mean?" "We found communications between Marcus and the head of this operation, dating back to before your parents died. They'd been planning to target your inheritance from the beginning." Maria pulled out printed emails and text messages. "Marcus fed them information about your family's financial situation, your parents' health status, even details about your personality that they used to craft Jessica's approach strategy." I couldn't breathe. "Are you telling me that Marcus planned this while our parents were still alive?" "Worse," David said quietly. "Sarah, we have evidence suggesting that Marcus may have been involved in causing your parents' car accident." The room spun around me. "That's impossible. He was in Las Vegas when they died." "He was scheduled to be in Las Vegas," Maria corrected. "But we found credit card charges placing him in Denver the day before the accident. Hotel records show he checked out of his Vegas hotel 2 days early but told everyone he was still there." She showed me a timeline they'd constructed. "Your parents' car went off the road on Highway 285, a route they'd driven safely for decades. The accident report noted that their brakes failed, but no mechanical inspection was performed because it was ruled accidental death. The car was totaled," David added. "Convenient for someone who might have tampered with it." I thought about Marcus's behavior after the funeral. How he'd seemed genuinely grief-stricken, how he'd hugged me and talked about supporting each other through our loss. "Had it all been an act, there's more," Maria continued. "The fraud ring has a specialist who handles the accident side of their operations. A man named Tony Reeves, who's an expert at making murders look like accidents. Phone records show Marcus was in contact with Tony the week before your parents died. The betrayal was so complete, so monstrous that I couldn't process it all at once. My brother, who I'd loved, supported, and worried about, had likely murdered our parents to steal my inheritance. The person I trusted most in the world had been planning my destruction for years." "Why didn't they just kill me too?" I asked numbly. "Too suspicious," David explained. "2 family deaths so close together would have triggered investigations. Better to let you inherit everything legally than steal it through fraud. Cleaner, less risk." "But it gets worse," Maria said. "We intercepted communications between Marcus and the fraud ring from yesterday. With Jessica in jail, and their plan falling apart, they're discussing more direct action." She played an audio recording from a wiretapped phone call. Marcus's voice talking to someone with a gravelly tone. "The sister's becoming a problem. She's got lawyers involved now and Jessica's in custody. Maybe it's time to consider the permanent solution." The gravelly voice responded, "We can handle that, make it look like a break-in gone wrong, but it'll cost extra." "Money's not an issue," Marcus replied. "I just need this resolved quickly before she uncovers the whole operation." I stared at the recording device in horror. My brother was planning to have me murdered. The family member I'd cared about most was arranging my death with the casual tone of someone ordering takeout. David leaned forward. Sarah, we're placing you in protective custody immediately. The police are coordinating with federal agents to arrest Marcus and the rest of this fraud ring, but until they're all in custody, you're not safe. Federal agents? This conspiracy crosses state lines and involves multiple felonies including murder, Maria explained. The FBI is taking over the investigation. What started as a property dispute has become evidence of a national criminal enterprise. As we sat there planning my protection, I felt a strange sense of clarity settling over me. Yes, I was devastated by Marcus's betrayal. Yes, I was terrified for my safety. But underneath those emotions was something harder and colder. A determination to see justice done not just for me but for every family this criminal ring had destroyed. I want to help, I told David. Whatever the FBI needs me to do to catch these people, I'll do it. Maria smiled grimly. Actually, we were hoping you'd say that. We have a plan that will not only keep you safe but help us round up the entire operation. Are you willing to be bait? Looking back, I should have been more scared of what they were proposing. Instead, I felt energized by the possibility of fighting back against the people who'd stolen my family, my security, and my trust. Marcus thought he was so clever planning my destruction while playing the grieving brother. He was about to learn exactly how wrong he was. The FBI's plan was elegantly simple. They'd let Marcus think his murder-for-hire plot was proceeding while secretly controlling every aspect of the operation. I would appear to be going about my normal routine, making myself an easy target while actually being surrounded by federal agents posing as neighbors, delivery drivers, and random pedestrians. Agent Sarah Chen, no relation to Jessica, thankfully explained the strategy. We've arrested Tony Reeves, the hitman Marcus hired, but Marcus doesn't know that. Tony's going to make contact with Marcus as planned, except everything he says will be scripted by us to gather maximum evidence. Within 48 hours they had Marcus on tape not only confirming his plan to have me killed but bragging about how he'd killed our parents. The arrogance was breathtaking. He actually told the undercover agent posing as Tony that tampering with brake lines was easier than people think, and that he'd practiced on a junk car first to make sure it would work. But the FBI wasn't finished. They used Marcus to lead them to the entire fraud network, 12 people operating across 8 states with over 40 victim families identified. The scheme had been running for nearly a decade, stealing millions of dollars in property and destroying countless lives. Jessica, faced with federal charges and evidence of her involvement in multiple crimes including conspiracy to commit murder, began cooperating immediately. She provided details about every con they'd run, every family they'd targeted, every document they'd forged. Her testimony revealed the full scope of their operation and provided evidence needed to prosecute the entire network. The trial made national news. Brother plots sister's murder for inheritance was the headline that appeared in papers across the country. The story had everything journalists loved: family betrayal, a sophisticated criminal conspiracy, forged documents, and a dramatic FBI sting operation. Marcus was convicted on 12 felony counts, including 2 counts of first-degree murder for our parents' deaths, conspiracy to commit murder for the plot against me, fraud, forgery, and racketeering. He was sentenced to life without parole. During his sentencing hearing, he finally looked at me directly for the first time since his arrest. Sarah, he said, I need you to know that I loved Mom and Dad. I got in so deep with the gambling, and these people said they'd kill me if I didn't pay. I never meant for it to go this far. Even then, even facing life in prison, he was still lying. The FBI had proven that Marcus initiated contact with the fraud ring, not the other way around. He'd seen an opportunity to solve his money problems by killing his family, and he'd taken it without hesitation. Jessica received 25 years for her role in the conspiracy. During her sentencing, she tried to claim she'd been manipulated by Marcus, that she genuinely loved him, and hadn't known about the murders. The judge wasn't impressed, especially since the evidence showed she'd been running inheritance cons for years before meeting Marcus. The other 10 members of the fraud ring received sentences ranging from 8 to 15 years. Her testimony revealed the full scope of their operation and provided evidence needed to prosecute the entire network. The trial made national news. Brother plots sister's murder for inheritance was the headline that appeared in papers across the country. The story had everything journalists loved: family betrayal, a sophisticated criminal conspiracy, forged documents, and a dramatic FBI sting operation. As we sat there planning my protection, I felt a strange sense of clarity settling over me. Yes, I was devastated by Marcus's betrayal. Yes, I was terrified for my safety. But underneath those emotions was something harder and colder. A determination to see justice done not just for me but for every family this criminal ring had destroyed. I want to help, I told David. Whatever the FBI needs me to do to catch these people, I'll do it. Maria smiled grimly. More importantly, the investigation led to the recovery of over $3 million in stolen assets, which were returned to victim families. For me, the legal victory was satisfying, but the emotional healing took much longer. I spent months in therapy working through the trauma of discovering that my closest family member had murdered our parents and planned my death. It also showed me that sometimes the people who hurt us most are the ones we'd never suspect, and that justice, while slow, can be incredibly satisfying when it finally arrives. Today I work as a consultant helping other inheritance fraud victims navigate the legal system and recover their stolen assets. It's meaningful work that helps me transform my trauma into something useful for others facing similar betrayals. 6 months after the trial ended, I finally felt ready to reclaim my life and my home. I had the house completely renovated, erasing every trace of Marcus and Jessica's presence. I planted new flowers in Mom's garden, ones they'd never seen or touched. I created new memories to overlay the contaminated ones. The experience taught me valuable lessons about trust, family, and the importance of listening to instincts when something feels wrong. Have you ever had family members betray your trust when money was involved? How do you think karma works in situations like this? Does justice always find a way to prevail? Share your thoughts in the comments below, because I've come on it. Learned that talking about these experiences helps all of us process the complex emotions around family betrayal. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button to help others find it who might need to hear about standing up for themselves against family manipulation. Subscribe to my channel for more true stories about overcoming betrayal and finding justice when the system works the way it should. And please share this video with anyone who might be dealing with similar family drama. Sometimes knowing you're not alone makes all the difference. Thank you for listening to my story, and for being part of a community that believes in holding people accountable for their actions, even when they're family. Remember, blood doesn't excuse behavior, and sometimes the strongest thing you can do is set boundaries with people who claim to love you while actively working to destroy your life. May you never face the kind of betrayal I experienced, but if you do, may you find the courage to fight back, and the support system to help you through it. Family should lift each other up, not tear each other down for personal gain.